Hello, everybody. Welcome to our World Today, the Unionist Perspective, the live discussion that we have every week about the news. Today we have a few things that we'd like to discuss. And first of all, I would like to start with a cultural topic that we've chosen for this week, which is that more and more people from Gen Z, apparently, are choosing to have some sort of digital detox through having dumb phones instead of smartphones. And it's funny because um 1 hour before this live started, I literally um came upon a post that the CEO of Nokia posted. And it's saying, we are bringing the 1999 feeling back with a relaunch of the Nokia 3210. You know, the super strong, the super strong one. So it now comes without TikTok, no Instagram, and absolutely zero chance for 5G connectivity. Enjoy JOMO, the joy of missing out. Hashtag digital detox. Hashtag human mobile devices. And yes, it has snakes. Snake the game. So that's so funny that in the span of a week I came upon so many of this article just saying like my son doesn't want a smartphone anymore. He just wants a phone with his music and a way to do SMS and our contacts info in here. No Instagram, no nothing. And I realized that maybe I agree too, because sometimes like if it wasn't for example, like my business and this community being online, I would feel like I'm just spending so much time on there. And if I didn't have a way to know how to balance myself through my healing and through self-discipline and self-love, I would want a way to cut it all out too, I would say. And yeah, I'm just seeing this as a trend, and I'm understanding the nature of a trend, and I'm just wanting to know, for you guys, do you feel that this is the solution of the future, or this is the solution, uh, maybe like a no solution, but like people are doing it out of despair? And I just want, before opening up to you guys, to say that basically in marketing, there's this thing that explains actually a lot about social things in the world. And it's basically like basically when an extreme is very trendy and an extreme explodes and so many people are going towards an extreme, a lot of people are also going to go towards another one of the extreme on the balance to try and balance it out. So basically people are kind of, balancing too much information and connection with going back to very minimalistic ways of living. So, how do you guys feel about that? And do you think this is a solution for our future?
I think it's a solution for those who do find it works for them. And of course, as you were speaking to a balanced life, it really helps to wean off of something in a more compassionate and like step by step process rather than going from one extreme to the other. But I do see that how beneficial it is for using, technology, and you get to experience contrast as it is when you really like numb out with like scrolling on TikTok. And I'm speaking for myself. Like there were times where I would just be like scrolling through TikTok and I'm like, wow, it's been 5 hours. Like, and then you realize like, oh, my eyes are hurting, my head is hurting. Like, I definitely don't want to do that again. So you definitely experience that contrast, and then you can move with that contrast. And us knowing the mirror exercise, it's a lot helpful to balance out that. But those who don't know, I think they experience it on themselves. Like, okay, yesterday was really like I had a headache and I don't want to go forward with whatever I was doing yesterday. But then if they find something like TFU in TikTok and they're receiving helpful information or like anything that's like informative and interesting, they can channel their focus on that. And it's not an extreme of like, I won't look at anything in social media, but I will do something that feels more aligned to my productivity and aligned to something purposeful.
Yeah, I feel that this could be really beneficial for some people too. Like all these different spiritual masters through the ages have said, if you're experiencing temptation and it's just really hard for you, you just get away from that temptation, just walk the other way. And I think that that can be helpful if someone has a big social media addiction, or it's just like an issue that takes up a lot of energy in their lives. This might be good and refreshing. I know. I remember in grad school when I went on a backpacking trip for like 3 days or something, and I didn't have cell phone service, and it was awesome because I could just completely relax and decompress, and it makes you aware. Doing that, it makes you aware of something like how much stress you have or how disconnected from yourself you might feel in your daily routine. So I feel like it can be good for people. I assume then you would go on your desktop computer or your laptop if you wanted to do social media, just like I did back when I was in middle school or junior high school. I had a dumb phone. I didn't even get a dumb phone until like, well, I think it was 7th grade, maybe 8th grade even. I don't even know if I had it.
I got my first dumb phone, and it was the Nokia. So this is
Nokia.
it's very nostalgic.
Yeah.
In sixth grade,
Yeah.
and yeah, it had Snake on there and everything.
Yay.
That was yeah, that was good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cute. I think it is Nokia because it's Finnish.
Yeah.
A Finnish company. I had a Nokia in Russia because my cell phone wouldn't work. So it felt like having a burner phone and doing mafia business, which
Yeah.
let's be real, if you're in Russia, how are you not? End of story.
I do feel too, I agree, like it can be a solution. I don't think it's the complete solution, but I think it could definitely have positive impact, But I think the real solution is like it's not to completely disconnect, but you have to address like your technology, your digital addiction.
Yeah.
That's the real solution. Because I definitely can do this too. Like I can watch YouTube for really like hours. Why am I doing this? What the fuck am I doing? And it's good to have a break, sometimes you just need that, but it's also sometimes I'm like avoiding something. Am I avoiding how I feel? Am I avoiding something else? Like just like any other addiction, right? You have to, but with like the work we have, you can the inner work, the spiritual work, you can address yourself, address the actual like feelings there and the root cause of maybe why you might be addicted to social media or something else, and healing that is the actual solution, and implementing like healthy strategies and healthy boundaries, having some discipline with like that. So yeah.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with you. Because it's like for me, social media is not a massive thing. Like, I don't see the fascination with the dumb things that happen on TikTok and everything else. Like, I just don't get it. Like, I look at some of these things that people share with me, and I'm like, where do people find the time for this crap? Like, what is going on, So that's kind of my perception of it. So opting for a dumb phone is not likely to happen because I want the functionality of a smartphone. But I also don't spend inordinate amounts of time on my phone. Like I would actually get aggravated with myself when I sit there for longer than an hour with my neck craned into this thing, because it's not actually a comfortable bodily position for you to actually feel comfortable. Like it just feels odd to me. So it's never something that's actually become a thing in my life. And I think the time when I probably got most irritated with spending so much time with my phone was during COVID. But like that was literally, hey, I'm watching like water evaporate. I might as well do something on my phone, kind of thing. But other than that, like I get it. I understand the extremes, but I've never played in the spaces of extremes. So it might be partly a solution for some people, but for me, it wouldn't be a solution because I've kind of limited it anyway.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Like, I feel like you have to look at the addiction of like what does this give you? What is the dopamine and attention that you seek? Like, for me, for example, I've definitely felt like since like school stopped, since I'm a music teacher, I found that the free time that I spent a lot of it on TikTok. But then I found that purpose to everything was kind of the very solution to not falling into it. So basically, I went from really scrolling and only seeing like dramatic, really good for nothing stuff to seeing things from women in STEM, for example, or social things, or things that I learned about my art, about creativity or others or inspiration. And then I would use this inspiration to go and create my own stuff. And that felt good. That completely changed my week. Like I was going into a week of like just scrolling, doom scrolling. And then it was like active, using my environment to do stuff. And so I think that purpose can be a solution to it as well. And that means that, there is actually a real value to having twin flames ascension school or life purpose class, since like it can really like heal this emotionally and also in terms of purpose is what I would say. So basically, yeah, I think that's it. Anything you would like to add to this, or yeah. So let's move on to, I would say, the news of this week, the big news of this week, which is um that Trump got shot at a rally as he was doing his speech, and obviously there is a lot of things around this that kind of reminds me of Bolsonaro being shot during his presidential campaign, and how um in Brazil, how this literally helped him win because he was seen as a martyr. And first of all, like I want to remind people because like a lot of people are saying that, oh my gosh, this is faked or things like that, but like someone actually died in the audience from it. So, and there were over victims, like 5 of them. And also it's kind of on the other side a relief that it was like a white Republican that did this, because that could not be instrumentalized or used for more than 24 hours to say like, oh my gosh, these are the Democrats or like people that are just like enemies of Trump that are trying to do this stuff. And I think it's kind of sad that we're in this like life was attempted basically, and we're just like seeing, oh my gosh, this is just going to polarize people even more. But it's good that it did not, I would say. So now that this is established, I just want to know, what did you guys hear? Maybe like the American citizens among us, like how did you live this past few days with the news? Like, what did it feel like? How did this look in the US and Grenville, of course, like if you have any insights that you would like to share about it, of course you're welcome to as well.
Yeah, like you were saying about the martyr thing, I saw on TikTok a lot of videos on how Trump has a bandage on his ear and he's dancing because now he's seen as a martyr. And it's just not many people are taking this seriously. And it shows that there has been like a block to communication. Like, why did that man shoot Trump? What was he trying to express? What was his issues that he wanted to bring up that Trump probably did not address in his presidency? And now he's upset that he would shoot Trump. And from that, there was 5 other people that died from that. So it definitely feels like a communication block when it comes to this election on what the people would want to express and how it's being expressed.
So, like, when you mentioned the martyr thing, I think my very initial thought when this happened and it was so highly publicized was like, is this real or was it like some type of publicity stunt? And I feel like there are too many instances where we don't fully know the almost inner workings of people's minds and activities to kind of push themselves into positions. So, my thought was like, did he stage this himself? Is it for real kind of thing? So that was literally my very initial thought. And I think it kind of stems from having seen some of the negative publicity around him for such a long time. And so this incident almost feels a bit like it has deflection power from the core of what was needing to be addressed in terms of his time as the president and the things that fell flat under his watch, and deflecting from that to a space of God, they went after him. There must be some power here. Like a weird shift to achieve an objective. And that's why I felt I kind of the underlying core didn't feel completely true to me. So that I feel like there's something more to the story, but I might also just be looking deeper than I need to.
Yeah, because maybe, yeah, because like it is being used by his campaign a lot. I didn't know Bolsonaro was also shot, but because it's being used by his campaign in the similar way, I get that, having that thought of like, oh, that could have all been set up, but it's kind of like it can be explained. Like, it is a weird thing that that was even allowed to happen, because like the Secret Service is responsible for that. They have had some mishaps over the last 10 years, I've heard, and stuff like that. The guy was in like the very outer perimeter So that would have fallen under local law enforcement to clear that building. But I think the guy still just scaled the building without entering it and was able to get on it. And it's just, it was too close of a call for it to actually have been staged, I feel, with someone who was too inexperienced. Like, he wasn't like a veteran or anything, like he wasn't like a super marksman, but he was decent, and he belonged to a shooting club and everything like that. But I think that it would be way too elaborate to be staged. But it was definitely one of those events where it's like, oh my gosh, like, how did this happen this way? Because the guy fired a shot, and because Trump turned his head to the right, like less than a second before, it grazed his ear, and it would have gone through a substantial portion of his head had he not turned his head to the right before that happened. So like, it was like a major, some people could call it a stroke of luck, but we know that luck doesn't exist, so I guess the choices weren't being made for that to happen or whatever. But yeah, it's crazy. But I feel like the narrative of like, we don't accept political violence is a strong narrative, because it's like, that's not how we want to resolve disputes with people who are just, spouting and saying things that we don't agree with, or even that sound like really vile and harmful, because that has been the case, right? But you don't do it by trying to like take people out. So I feel like that should be the message, because that's the truth.
Yeah, I think that shouldn't be the response. Like, we're not in the 70s, like, or the 60s. We shouldn't have to worry about this today, about assassination attempts towards like political and social leaders, no matter if we agree with them or not. And basically what I feel, even though it removed a little bit of a focus on why Trump failed to respond and keep his promises about stability during his presidency, I feel it also touches on something that we really should start looking into right now, and not just because of race. And this is mass shootings, and the fact that before his assassination attempts, there were already like 35 mass shootings in July alone in the US. And a lot of them kind of happened in that state. A few of them happened in that state, and there were a few more that happened after his assassination attempt. So there's really like a need to look at, not just like, it's not just about like what are the secret services doing. It's more of like, we really need to look at the gun problem, you know? And this is complex. Like, this isn't just about one thing, what happened on Sunday, but the gun problem, it should very much be at the forefront for me.
So it's a good thing that you mentioned that, because something that, as you were talking, something that jogged, like just popped up, is that he's been quite a proponent of the gun lobby, right? And he's quite supported by the gun lobby. And that has been something that kind of plagued his presidency and his campaigning previously. And so it almost feels like things will not change unless you're potentially affected by the thing you've been supporting in the first place. So it kind of says maybe reconsider what you're doing. It's a very odd way to get the message. I get it. And I wouldn't advocate for contrast to be the way that shift happens. But it also highlights that actually, you know what? There might just be a requirement for you to reconsider some of what you are a proponent of and maybe become a little bit stricter about safeguarding yourself and others.
Yeah, and hopefully this explains that this isn't necessarily about attempting to, you know, save gun, property, and 10th Amendment and things like that. It's not about that. It's not about attacking people that know that they can be responsible with the use of their guns. It's really about being safe around, like, just being safe, gun safety, safety in schools. And I feel like, the supporters of Trump and the gun lobby, because a lot of them voted for Trump because of the gun lobby, a lot of them are just like regular, normal people that use guns. And you gotta understand that that's not the people we want to target here. And there's no target really. You want to target, they want to look at, hopefully this is a better word, people that had mental problems that are not allowed to have guns, or really regulating in order to feel safe as a society, not um, not remove guns entirely.
Yeah, and I think that that's really it, right? Under all circumstances, you wanna have laws that are reasonable and enforceable in a country. And so you kind of do need to consider where there is a requirement to tighten those laws, regardless of mental or mental stability or instability. There's kind of this requirement that the laws need to be potentially more pervasive for the usage and acquiring of guns.
I agree. And I also saw in the headlines yesterday that I don't know which judge, but he's dismissing a lot of Donald Trump's cases and his I don't know if any of you guys saw that. A lot of Donald Trump's cases is being dismissed. So I feel like there's like a spiritual understanding that's been going on with Trump being shot and then his cases also being dismissed. Something's going on in his life that um, hopefully brings more awareness to his choices in leading a country.
Any last words on that?
It was just interesting how everything, it kind of worked out in such a way as like just to spark a conversation about a lot of things, instead of it being like, I mean, but it already was a tragedy just from what did happen, but it was kind of, it shows how when things like this happen, it really, the purpose of it is to bring awareness, and it really shows in this case, and awareness to what is something that people can like definitely debate about, but it definitely does, bring awareness, and people kind of pick and choose what meaning to take from it. But you kind of have to like take all of it in and really sort of what's factual and what's not. And also never like, don't make conclusions that you don't have evidence for, because a lot of the talk around this is literally can all just be completely disregarded because it's all just based on speculation. So
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah, I would definitely. Thank you, Sage. That was very, very good. I would definitely advise against going straight towards conspiracy. And I'm looking at my fellow people of color here because the amount of things that I saw in group chats about people not believing that this was true, um, he still has a presumption of being believed, and this is still an attempt at a life, no matter what we say. So yeah, that's definitely not something, whatever happens, that's potentially not something that no one would ever want to, experience unless they were like really, really crazy. And this is like a 1% chance that this was staged. So yeah, it shouldn't be like the forefront of the discussions, the conspiracies. Otherwise, like we're doing worse than the other camp that is just saying like this is a conspiracy from the Democrats and the people of color against them and things like that. We're no better. We're no better. So we need to be better and more peaceful. So moving on. We want to look at something that is pretty interesting and unusual, and this is research that Grenville has done around the governance and geopolitics in space. And Grenville, I would love for you to kind of explain in a simple way, like how what's happening there, because like a lot of people are going to space. Obviously, we're going to Mars maybe soon. And there are a lot of questions about governance and politics and borders in a borderless territory. So would you mind kind of summarizing your research for us?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I think one of the things that's quite interesting is that while there's been great calls for regulation in that space, and it's been surprisingly a topic of discussion for quite a long time, there's no real framework. And so the article that I found in Geopolitical Monitor, it starts to look at what already exists in the laws of armed conflicts that are already very applicable, very entrenched in how armed conflicts should be managed across various countries, within and across various countries. And so things like the Geneva Conventions, the Hague Conventions that set parameters for what is allowable and what is acceptable are being proposed as potential frameworks to start to build, or potential guidelines to start to build a framework for governing outer space and potential conflict in outer space. And so, very simply, there are principles entrenched in all of those conventions. So the Geneva Conventions, the Hague Convention, there are various declarations. One of them, I think, is the Paris Declaration. There's a Luxembourg Declaration, and it speaks to principles around distinction, proportionality, limitation, and humanity. So high level distinction basically says that there has to be a distinction between military and civilian objects so that civilians are treated or almost protected more during these conflicts because they don't have access to the means to engage in those conflicts. So it almost kind of looks to safeguard the civilian under warfare. Then there's the thing of proportionality, which speaks to that the usage of military equipment and the use of force must be proportionate to the military objective. So literally, if you're protecting a border, you can't go and nuke a country just because you're choosing to protect your border. There has to be proportionality in terms of what force you choose to use during wartime activities. Then there's limitation, which means there's a limitation on the means and methods. Again, so you can't go to extremes during wartime using chemical warfare and those kind of things, because the effects are much more pervasive than, for instance, bearing arms and those kind of things. So you can't go overboard. Literally, that if you wanted it in a word, it says don't go overboard. And then there's also the principle of humanity, which looks at treating all individuals with respect and dignity. So there's rules around soldiers that are injured. There's rules around their care. There's rules around civilians and their care and their safety. So the principle of humanity seems to be pervasive in quite a few of those conventions and agreements that have been passed to ensure that warfare doesn't become literally out of hand. And so the proposal is to use those same principles to start creating a framework to govern potential conflicts in outer space, given that nothing exists right now.
My thing is, like, we haven't even established land out of space, and we're already thinking of how to defend ourselves and use defense and attack others that come to our territory. So it's like, without even going to your new home, you're thinking of like all the issues that could potentially arise. And yeah, that's all I had to say about it.
I can understand you.
I hear you. Sorry, Yuri. Just my 2 cents of what Nadia said. I hear you, but like, I almost feel like we need to err on the side of caution. Like we really need to get ahead of it so that there is a framework. It's like like I get what you're saying, but it's like kind of trying to build a house but not having an architectural plan. I feel like this is the architecture to safeguard some of those things, and I think it's quite necessary.
Really? Because isn't this how like colonism started? By taking these territories and like marking them and then using the force that you had to, dominate more territories. Like,
Well, yeah.
who's to say that there won't be like integrity crossed with having such weaponizing things,
I think I can understand where you come from. I think the interesting thing about the article that Granville shared, and I shared it in the chat for anyone who would like to look at it, is that present day ground conflicts rely heavily on the infrastructure rendered operational by recurring space missions over the past 60 years. And I think just having this introduction gives us kind of a visibility around like, oh, like conflicts are already in space because we're using satellites to do our ground conflicts right now. And I know a lot of the article is about like protection of humanity, and this is good. And I think just putting that into context that we're already using satellites in our wars, and armed weapons that are kind of almost in space, and defensive weapons that are literally in space on satellites. We can see how it would be better to have these laws. These laws are defensive, not offensive, and that I think that's a good thing. It would be good to have these laws before we ever have to experience the war. Like it's better to have them before the war and maybe prevent a war whatsoever to happen than to have an after. And I can understand how it feels like jumping the gun. It definitely feels like it sometimes when you read this kind of stuff, and it's not your daily life to look at this stuff. But then you take a step back and realize that a lot of space conquering is literally based on building colonies in outer space. Like literally, like Mars is basically it's called like the Mars colony because the real like definition of it without any negative or positive judgment is that you're going on a land that is not yours. So basically space is considered a land that is not yours. So it's always like a colonial kind of way of seeing things. And if people have thought about it, they've definitely thought about the worst thing that can happen with colonialism. And it's even been in like our art, like Star Wars, like one of the biggest franchise is literally about war in space. So people are thinking about it, even though like it's not most people. And I think you know, it's not that far off to try to build something around defending our humanity in space. Because like there's literally a movie that you know that was out at the beginning of the year that is about like nuclear war on Earth and the people in the ISS helping their side, their country from space. So literally it was like from space, there is no rules. Like these people like there are actually people that train to go to space and it's their life dedication, their life mission. So they need protection too. And I think when you see this in context, it makes a little bit more sense, hopefully. So like I don't know, like you can like literally not have changed your mind about it. You can feel like it's still jumping the gun, but maybe that gives a little bit more perspective on it for you, Nadia.
Yeah, I definitely get what you're saying. And Granville's example of architecture, I understand that, especially because we need that architecture for where we're at right now on Earth. That we do need protection from crazy ass people. Excuse me. And we do. We're not at a point where we have a divine community, a divine world where we can move those principles to outer space. We're at a place where we still need that defense and we still need that protection. So if we're expanding at this point, I can understand why we would need these principles.
Yeah, and I
But
agree with you because sorry, I thought you were done. Sorry.
we wouldn't need these measures because we all have the mirror exercise and we can communicate as mature spiritual beings, but that's not the case right now.
And the fact of the matter is we've seen it so many times. We've seen it countless times in even just financial trading. If you don't have governance, you scurry because then then you have to catch up to what has gone wrong. Whereas now you're saying, these are the boundaries. Do not exceed the boundaries. Just stop your crazy assness, as you put it.
Yeah, and like, yeah, we are already there. And like also recent news, like the Ukrainian military somehow took out some sort of satellite communications of Russia's that I'm pretty sure that they just used for military operations for their like quote unquote logistical operations, if you can even call it that. So for Russia, I would call it illogistical operations because not very organized. But the satellites, like taking those out, that would be a great way for Ukraine to like further cause and stop an aggressor. So as long as the satellites you take out don't like majorly disrupt the internet or communications for like masses of people in the country, because that would be really disruptive to our modern day economies. Like that wouldn't be cool. But if you're like just taking out kind of like military type communications, it could be like fine. And I feel like things like that are like cases where we're already needing to have like a framework for space warfare. So as crazy as it may sound, you know, but Ronald Reagan was even talking about Star Wars back in the 80s. So we're already there. So
Yeah. It
yeah.
was really in a race for space. That Cold War was really, getting on in space. So it's not, mm, it feels unusual, definitely, but it's not like that unusual for people who are in geopolitics like every day, like consuming this type of info every day. So yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and I guess moving on to our last topic of the day, we are going to talk about maternal mortality. Oh, I fumble my words. I stumble on my words right now for a little bit. Maternal mortality in the US is increasing, and we kind of are curious to know why. This is a phenomenon that is added to the fact that natality, birth rates, is already kind of low in countries like the US, Japan, or France. And Nadia was one to do this research, and I'm curious, Nadia, if you could like summarize a little bit what you took out of the article that I'm going to share right now in the chat.
Yeah. So maternal mortality has definitely gotten worse in the last 10 to 15 years span. And there has been a research gap on why that is. What this article is showing is that there has been discrimination against a lot of different race groups when they are giving birth to their babies, especially aftercare for the mothers. Specifically for Black Americans and Native Americans, there has been a discrepancy in care, as well as mental health issues that have not been addressed. So the two main things that I've seen was PTSD from mothers, as well as not receiving the care that they needed while giving birth. So the article didn't go into how to resolve these, but rather to bring awareness to what is going on. And we've known this for many years now. There has been discrepancies when it comes to Black women giving birth compared to other races. And although all races have experienced maternal mortality in the last 10 years, an increase in it, Black and Native American has been the worst. And it comes down to the healthcare system and how things are being taken care of. So really, this article is an in-depth analysis on stories of when mothers have experienced terrible birth-giving experiences and the research on who is affected the most. So there was another part on cesareans, and cesareans being a lot of risk for mothers, even now, even with all of our healthcare procedures and growth. So this really is an awareness, and we can bring it into the spiritual aspect of why mothers in general like are receiving such poor care when it comes to giving birth. For one, I feel that this world, our nation, has not given the attention that it needs when it comes to bringing new life into this world. But it also gives that gap of not giving the appropriate equal treatment to mothers as well. So not only are you not taking care of a baby that's coming into life, but you're discriminating on the baby in itself. So the baby feels that, the mother feels that, and you're going into this vicious cycle of feeling not taken care of where you should be properly taken care of. And there isn't much to say about resolution for me, because I'm still sitting with it and thinking, like, aside from bringing this into awareness and recognizing that there is discrimination and there is poor health qualities, I don't know what else to say about this. I don't know what would cause us to, you know, plummet like this. COVID, of course, isn't a factor of that, but also, like, being one of the richest nations, how could we get to this point? I'm not saying it in a disappointing factor. I'm just saying it in, where have we been, like, not growing? Where have we not been growing, and where have we not been taking care of ourselves, that this would come to this, and it's continuing to get worse?
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. I feel there is a lot to this question. First of all, like the fact that I feel like there are still some like weird things from maternity itself and birthing. Basically, like just like 150 years ago, like it was still common to die when you were giving birth, and now we have the high of medicine for our time, and people are still, you know, dying, and it's clear that in the US, like people, there are definitely still people that are like increasingly feeling like they're not being taken care of during birth, and so it definitely seems like a pattern and upset in the medical system. First of all, like I would say something that we're going to talk about next week is like the fact that it's still difficult to know a lot about women's health. And for reasons that we're going to go deeper in the next few weeks. But basically, like it feels like half the population is not understood. That's definitely something to heal. And for example, here in France, like I've heard a lot of like horror stories about giving birth, and the fact that it can be a very traumatic event. It's always like very hard for the body to give birth and to recuperate, but like sometimes like people are not paying attention to signs that the mother is having difficulty, like health difficulties during giving birth. Sometimes, like, if they have horror stories about being stitched up afterwards in a cesarean, and like sometimes we're like really, really in deep pain, and people are saying that they are exaggerating. And we know from Black Lives Matter that it's this feeling that women are exaggerating their pain is even worse and even less taken seriously for people of color. So there are a lot of things that are adding up here. And I saw this, it was funny because I saw this even right now about like really like people coming forth with their horror stories with surgeon and experiencing sexism when they're being operated, which does not happen when you're being operated, right? So I feel like there is a lot of trauma and just a lot of things to heal and of things to change right now. This is not just about medical height. This is about healing maybe how arrogance for a part of the medical field. And also maybe understanding, I don't know what it is, if it is the same in the US, but I think in France, like a lot of healthcare professionals are just overworked, like doing 14 to 21-hour shifts, and not enough people to take care of everybody, and that can bring out, I guess that can bring out the worst in people. And so we really need to take a really deep, hard look at at how our healthcare system is done, because we know even in the richest countries, like the Western countries, the most democratic countries, we know that we're having problems with our healthcare systems. So yeah, it's just about really taking a deep, hard look at it right now. So how do you guys feel about that? Oh, sorry, Najat, you're muted. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, that's a good point you brought up, is that the majority of our lifestyle is not conducive for a divine feminine, especially during pregnancy and after pregnancy. But in general, like divine feminines that are working and then have to transition into pregnancy and then have to transition back to work is not conducive to their body, and is probably why they're not able to pay attention to the issues. Like one of the highest rated issues was heart issues because of pregnancies. And so if you're ignoring that, especially with stress and tension, which is caused by the workforce, then yeah, I can really understand that. And I say that this is one of the richest nations, but rich in what? Because abundance comes from that freedom to not have to work so hard. And we don't have that right now. And it's showing in our births and it's showing in our healthcare.
I think both of you have touched on something quite important in terms of the acceptance and treatment of the feminine and the respect of the feminine. And, I almost feel like it is an unintended consequence of how humanity has evolved. So there was this perception that the female and the feminine has to compete in the masculine world. And so, in certain instances, there was also the feeling that women were taking away masculine jobs. And so, there's still this almost level of disrespect between the feminine and the masculine, and this competitiveness that almost sometimes makes you downplay the hurt and the pain so that you can compete in that space and show up in that space and benefit in that space. So there's still an inequality at the core between the masculine and the feminine. I think that's where the source of healing actually is to heal the sovereignty of the masculine and feminine in relation to each other.
Yeah, I guess learning that it's important to show up as yourself, masculine or feminine, no matter what. Like there's no like showing up as masculine just because you're doing a masculine job, or or there's no like dismissing a whole part of the population because it's harder to do medical tests on them. Like we really have to claim ourselves in all fields, basically. And I think that's a lesson. And yeah, I'm looking forward to continuing this discussion, hopefully next week with discovering more about women's health and why it's so misunderstood still today. And for now, it is the end of our discussion. So thank you to everybody who watched us live from our Facebook group, and thank you to everybody who watched us from the replay on YouTube. If you enjoyed this discussion, please like, subscribe, and comment so we can continue to do more of these. And see you next week. Bye-bye.